I'm so glad that you are all here. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to record this, so if any of you ask questions, I will repeat the question into the microphone. I'm Lori Butterworth. I know all of you. I'm the founder and executive director of Jacob's Heart. I'm also the co-founder of the Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition. What this training is about is helping our volunteers and our teams and our partners and our board understand the whole scope of hospice, palliative care, and bereavement, and how Jacob's Heart fits in and how we partner with that, what kinds of services we provide. So some of this information is a little difficult. All of you have been volunteers here at Jacob's Heart for quite some time, and so you very much are the most prepared for having some of these conversations. So we're going to go over the history of Jacob's Heart. All of you know the history of Jacob's Heart, but I'm going to tell you some of the stories about the beginning of Jacob's Heart that will put into context the principles of palliative care and bereavement and the family-centered services. So you'll hear another kind of a version of our history that will help you understand the philosophy behind the palliative care and bereavement services that we provide. So people have requested sort of a history of hospice in the United States. Some of you have volunteered at hospice as well, but I'll focus specifically on hospice for children and how that movement has gone about in the U.S. and how it affects our children that we serve at Jacob's Heart. And then we'll define some terms, and we'll talk about grief and loss and how we navigate grief and loss with families here at Jacob's Heart. And then we'll take some time at the end for some questions, comments, and I'd like to hear from people about their responses to this. And then if you are ever in need of support or have a question, just feel free to ask any of us. So I want to acknowledge that the Jacob's Heart staff, all of our staff members, recently received 5 scholarships to go to an intensive training. You guys might remember when a lot of us were gone at this training. It's the End-of-Life Nursing Education Consortium training, so our bilingual, bicultural staff, as well as some of the family members who work here, were able to be trained in this. So a lot of the concepts and the things that I'll be sharing with you today are from that training. I was trained as a trainer I have my thing on the wall over there, you can see it, when I got the award for palliative care, and also was trained as a trainer back in, I think, 2007. But the curriculum has been so enriched, and every time we go, you learn so much more. So I would recommend if any of you can ever go. It's really a valuable, valuable training. Okay, so let's start talking about palliative care and hospice. Okay, first of all, hospice, I'll look on with you here, Lorraine. Okay, so we asked the question, what is hospice? And just to be clear, Jacob's Heart do you guys know, I would ask you, do you know if Jacob's Heart provides hospice care? What would you guess?
No.
No, right, no, we don't provide hospice care, because in order to provide hospice care, you are a licensed hospice, and hospice is a benefit for the terminally ill. That is really the key to hospice. And it's a whole philosophy of care, family-centered care that looks at the whole patient, mind, body, and spirit. And we'll talk a little bit more about that philosophy. But we don't provide hospice care. We work with hospices for integrating services when there's a loss of a child. So now palliative care, so people get those kind of mixed up, like what's the difference between hospice and palliative care? So for palliative care, there are different definitions. We here at Jacob's Heart use the definition by the American Academy of Pediatrics. That is the definition that we use. And I will give you the whole 2-page definition of pediatric palliative care. So Jacob's Heart does provide palliative care. Palliative care, there's a clinical piece of palliative care, which is nursing care. Do we do that? No, but there's also that care is integrated with the psychosocial, emotional, and family support, the practical support. You'll see in the American Academy of Pediatrics definition of palliative care that it talks about it's care that's integrated, spiritual support, psychosocial support, emotional support, and practical support. A lot of you have done the grocery deliveries. That's practical support. Something that people don't know is any service can really be palliative. as long as it's integrated into a philosophy. Palliative care is a philosophy of care. Both hospice and palliative care are concepts, philosophies. Hospice is not a place. Palliative care is not like one thing. It's a philosophy of care. It came from the whole idea of a cloak. Kind of, so you could picture a cloak going around an entire family. It's family-centered. Let's look at the definition. Sorry about that. Okay. So it's broader than hospice. It can be used in any stage of the illness. And it is designed, this is key, it is designed to meet the unique and special needs of children, for pediatrics, children living with a life-threatening condition. Okay, it's not just associated with death. Okay? It recognizes that everyone in the family is affected. You notice that here. And one of the goals of palliative care is to improve the quality of life for the family. That definition of pediatric palliative care came out a few years ago. That's been our mission statement at Jacob's Heart since 1998. So, yeah. So it's that we knew, and so when we were talking about the history of Jacob's Heart, I'll share with you a piece of the history of Jacob that you may not know, all these years being here, that just recently I had a conversation with Jacob about his memories when he was 5 years old in the hospital. And people would bring him toys, and people would bring him, things to make him feel better. People always assume that a stuffed animal, we're not really all that into so many stuffed animals here. We're more into practical support for families, because what Jacob said, even back in 1998, was what he worried most about was his family. 5 years old, he worried about his family. And it was of great comfort to him, even at 5 years old, when we came and supported his mother. He said, "You were the first person that came and said, that want to take care of my mother," and he remembers feeling a sense of relief. So that, at 5 years old, yeah, that is really one of the concepts, the key concepts of palliative care, is family-centered care. And we can really understand it from a child's perspective, because we know here that what a child needs more than any toy, anything, is a strong, informed family to be there for their care. So all of the programs that we have here, you'll notice that they support the family through the all the way through the journey. The other thing about palliative care is it needs to be introduced at the time of diagnosis. Okay, when we talk about hospice in a minute, you'll understand why this mindset of waiting until someone's dying to think about hospice, waiting until someone's dying to think about palliative care, is not the concept of palliative care. We have those conversations, we integrate those services all the way through. So at Jacob's Heart, there's another boy, you'll see his picture in the Hall of Fame. And we were in existence for probably 2 or 3 years. So it was about 2001 when we got a referral for this young man who lived in Watsonville, 13 years old, oldest of 13 children. Both of his parents were farm workers. And the social worker at the hospital said, "We have this child who lives in your service area. They really need support. They don't have a car. They didn't have a way to get back and forth to the hospital." We're all nodding our heads. We're familiar with that. And he never smiles. This boy is just shut down. He won't communicate with us. He won't talk to us. He never smiles. And so I went and picked him up and met them and brought him home and took him to they lived in one of the farm worker camps nearby here. All the kids came out when he came home. He was smiling from ear to ear. There's a picture on that slide of him standing at his house with a big smile on his face. I sent that to the social workers and they couldn't believe it. They said, "That is not the same kid." What we learned from that is that children want to be home as much as possible, especially when their lives are short. So his disease progressed faster than they could cure it. And it was progressing and progressing and progressing. He had osteosarcoma, which some of you are familiar with. It's a very, very aggressive bone cancer. And he was in terrible pain. So I called Hospice to see if they could come to their home in Watsonville and provide services. And they said, "You can't make a hospice referral." And I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about it. And so I said, "Why?" And they said, "It has to come from a doctor," right? So I didn't know. So, okay, sure. So I understand. I called the doctor, and the doctors in the hospice agreed that he didn't qualify. And I thought, Why? I didn't know why, but what I do know is that 3 days later, he died after calling 911 and being rushed to the emergency room at the local hospital here, where nobody knew about his care. And I was absolutely livid. And so about that time, I met Devin Dabbs, who we co-founded the Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition. It was actually on September 11th, 2001, when the planes hit the buildings, that we had a conversation in the parking lot of our children's school. And I shared with her, I get emotional telling the story, I shared with her what had happened to this boy and how horrible it was. I don't understand why children don't qualify for hospice. So we decided to look into it. So we got online and we learned a lot about how the hospice how hospice evolved in the United States. So I'd like to share a little bit about that history, and then we can figure out what was wrong. Okay? So first of all, hospice started it started a long time ago, but the first hospice that we have in our hospice history was Dame Cicely Saunders, and it started in the UK. And it was 1967, I think. You can look at your slides. And she started this hospice, and the whole idea was we know, as we know of hospice now, it's looking at a patient, the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, and it's all about family and what's important to that patient. Wonderful, beautiful way to do care for people. So Dame Cicely was invited by Florence Wald, who was have you heard of her? She was, she was the director of nursing at Yale University. She invited Dame Cicely out and was so moved by her talk and really loved this kind of care that she started the first hospice in the United States in Connecticut. And so what people don't really know is that first hospice was started by Nurse Wald, a chaplain, and 2 pediatricians. So 2 pediatricians were the doctors that started the first hospice. And then you fast forward a little bit, and they were trying to figure out, how do we get this service paid for by Medicare? Because we want to make this available to more people. So that was the intention. So finally, after a couple of attempts, Congress in 1982 passed the first Medicare provision for hospice. And they thought, well, how do we define who gets this care? Because you have to have some kind of limitations, right? So they looked at adults with cancer. And they thought, okay, the trajectory of a typical adult cancer patient this is how it goes. So they decided that that the doctor and the patient would agree that if the disease progressed as expected, they would anticipate 6 months or less to live. So that was the first provision. And then the other provision was that patient would have to give up curative therapies. You're all nodding your heads because you're familiar with this. Yeah. For cancer, it would be aggressive chemotherapy, radiation therapy that's intended to cure your disease or prolong your life. Okay, so here Devin and I were back in 2001, and we're looking at this, and of course, it dawned on me, that doesn't work for children, because the parents are the ones making the decisions. So at the same time, that was 2001, at the same time, the Institute of Medicine was doing research on this and finding that about 1% of children who needed hospice got it at that point. And in 2002, they released a groundbreaking study which just put it out there. The Institute of Medicine put this study out. It's called When Children Die. And it changed everything. It said, and there's text in there, you guys have copies of this, where it said that the way the hospice benefit is designed presents cruel choices for parents when it's for children. And it makes perfect sense. So fast forward, there's a lot more history about this, but we fast forward to there's a picture over there, some of you were looking at the signing of the bill in 2006, which that was a bill that Governor Schwarzenegger signed into law that allowed California to implement a waiver. And a waiver basically is a federal provision that you can try something different. And so we got this time frame to try something different, where we would essentially provide palliative and hospice care services to children without a time frame and without having to give up their diseases, their life-enhancing medications. So that's called the Partners for Children waiver. You'll hear about that, and there's more about that and information you can look up and learn about. It's available in 9 counties right now in California. Santa Cruz, Monterey, and Santa Clara counties are 3 of those 9 counties that are participating in this program. The service provider, the medical provider that provides the services, is Coastal Kids Home Care. You know them. We work really closely with them. They do the in-home nursing and the waiver services. And we work closely with them to enhance those services for the other pieces of the social, emotional, practical support that Jacob's Heart provides. So, but one thing that's one of this wonderful thing, that children have more access to palliative care. However, one thing is they have to qualify, they have to be full scope Medi-Cal. So that means that not every child that needs that gets it still. So there's some more good news, which is it's all evolving, but there's some more good news. In 2010, we worked with several people from around the country to develop a provision in the Affordable Care Act. It's provision 2302. And it's revolutionary. It's a teeny tiny piece of that big bill, right? Yeah. So but 2302. Are you ready for this? Allows for children to receive curative and life prolonging therapies and hospice at the same time. That's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. But there's one problem with it. They did not remove the 6-month death prognosis. So hospice for children is still a limited life expectancy. But they do get to continue with their life enhancing. And some children graduate off. Yeah. And then you have to re-enroll them. So we have these options here that we can, if we have a child we think is appropriate for one of these programs, we can make some calls and help, like do the concurrent care for hospices so they're more inclined to take care of children. Or we can work with Coastal Kids to have the children on the palliative care waiver. So those are pretty amazing things that have happened. In your packets, you'll see there's some charts about the first one. You see, let's see what slide number it is. Where are we here? Yeah. Oh, here we go. Slide number 12. See that chart where you look at how palliative care and curative care is together in that box on the left. That they are integrated together during the first part, and then you have the hospice box. You can transition to hospice, and then after a death, you see the line of the death, then bereavement starts. The hospice benefit and the Partners for Children benefit allow for a year of bereavement, okay? Which I have very strong opinions about. When you lose a child, a year is nowhere near enough bereavement support. It doesn't even start well, it does. I mean, it's important to have that year of bereavement, but you'll know that the services, you all know, the services that we provide to families who lose a child lasts a lifetime. Yeah. So I would, someday like to redo that slide. And this is what it looks like for a child. And bereavement is a squiggly line. It's really, really, it's not linear. It doesn't go down the slope like they show. And so a chart like that is really not reflective of what we talk about when we talk about bereavement. So I want to move into telling you about our bereavement services, what we do. Some of you are very familiar with our comprehensive bereavement support. It includes counseling. It includes support groups. Some of those are 8-week thematic support groups that we do in coordination with Hospice of Santa Cruz County for our Santa Cruz County families, and we do with the Cancer Center in Monterey, or in Salinas, and we have partners that we work with, Catholic Charities, a lot of partners that we work with to do our support groups. And then we have a very strong peer mentorship program where we have bereaved family members, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, grandparents. When there's a loss of a child, we match them up and we help them they help each other. It's a beautiful, beautiful program. And then we have some traditions and rituals here at Jacob's Heart that have been going on for 17 years that I'll share with you in a moment. But now I want to do some definitions in the world of bereavement. So I want to ask you to get a piece of paper. You have paper there, just turn one of those over. And I'm going to ask you first, we're going to do this kind of quickly. And I want to ask you first to make a list of 5 activities that you enjoy. 5 things you like to do. Okay? I'm going to rush you along a little bit. Now, the next list is 5 things that you cherish or value. And I'm talking about things, not people. Okay? Items.
Not people?
Not people. That comes next.
Give me that again, I was still
Things, 5 things that you cherish or value. You don't have to overthink it, just things you value, things you like.
And if we can't think of 5, we can quit.
Make them up. You can have Elmo, Norma. Okay, and then the next list, of course, is the 5 most important people in your life. And then the last list is 5 things you look forward to in the future. Okay?
You stumped me on that one.
Okay. It can be going to lunch with Lorraine, Norma.
Oh. I always look
Okay.
forward to
Yeah,
that.
I know things you look forward to. Okay. All right. 5 things, you got it? Okay, you should have 20 things there. Okay.
I came up short. but
Okay, that's okay. All right. So now I want you to just imagine that your child has some flu-like symptoms and it's not going away. You got fever, not going away. You take your child to the pediatrician and they say they're going to do some blood work, and then the blood work comes back and they tell you that they've got to send it up to Stanford for additional tests. I want you to look at your list and take away 3 things from your list. No, from any of the 20.
Scratch 3 things.
Take away
in
3
view of
things.
this.
Just take away 3 things. Okay? Now you have to drive up to Stanford to have the conversation. They take you into a room, and there's a team of some doctors and some people there, and they sit you down, and they very compassionately tell you that we're sorry, your child has cancer. Take away 3 more things. Scratch them out. And they explain that the treatment for this cancer, it's treatable, it's curable. And they tell you that it's going to take some time, though. So you realize, as they explain, that the next 3 years of your life, a minimum of 3 years, will be all about traveling back and forth from home to the hospital and managing the life of chemotherapy, radiation, and the treatment. So take away 3 more things. And you continue the treatment. You're going through the treatment day after day, up and back. You're getting support. You're getting through it. And they tell you that unfortunately there's a relapse. And they're going to have to take a different kind of approach. So take away 3 more things. And then you find that they tell you that there's really not a lot they can do medically. We're going to focus on quality of life. And you know that the time with your child is short. So that's getting harder and harder, but try to take away 3 more things. And you almost get to a point where you just can't do it, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go down off to the table.
Yeah, yeah. So what that process is, when you took those things away, that is the definition of loss. You're taking something away from life that you love, that you cherish. That's loss. And you had feelings. You had feelings, right? I could see it. That there were feelings about that loss. That's grief. The definition of grief is the response to a loss. It's an emotional response to loss. And every one of us feels grief differently. We feel loss differently. And then the outward expression of that grief, what we do in our family, in our community, in our church, individually. Some people do religious ceremonies, some people pray, some people meditate, some people walk, some people drink. That outward expression is mourning. And you think about mourning, and just for a moment, just think about how individual that is, how personal that is. And there's not a timeline, there's not a right way to do that, there's no formula. It's very, very individual. And all of those things, the loss, the grief, and the mourning, are all part of our bereavement program, right? Those are the principles that we hold, that everybody's loss is just unique. But what you'll notice in that activity that we just did, there wasn't a death. The loss and the grief starts early. So we acknowledge that it's not this linear thing that, okay, now we start to talk about loss, right? So that's really a good exercise to really understand the context that we provide our bereavement support through.
Yeah, exactly the same one I did on the hospice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and you can, the stories can be different. For our purposes, we talk about the childhood cancer, but really in life it's all of those things, right? Yeah. So that's a modification of something that we do in end of life care training at LNEC. We learned that. So when we talk about the loss of a child here, it's a special sorrow. It's a different kind of sorrow. So we design we open our hearts and we design our programs with that in mind. And like I said before, it's not linear. It's not something that's predictable, and there's no right way to do it. We have found that if you just have like a bereavement program where you say, okay, we provide individual counseling, that's what we do. That's good. That'll meet the needs of certain people, but how do we broaden that? And what we found, I'd like to share this with you because this is really recent, that we've discovered that our support groups at night, it was, I would say, 90, maybe 95% mothers would come to the support groups. The dads would sit in the car. They wouldn't come in. They drop their wives off sometimes. So for all these years, we're thinking, how do we get dads to come? So we just recently started doing the breakfasts across we did it in Monterey, we do it at First Tea and at the restaurant down in Salinas, and then there's a restaurant in Monterey, and then there's the California Grill here. So we have these breakfasts for bereaved parents, and we found that it's about 50-50 men and women coming. It works, yeah. So the fathers will come and have breakfast, and sometimes they'll even come without their wives. It's really amazing. And then we provide the art therapy for the kids, for the siblings at the same time, and that just works really well. So that's another like facet of it. And then sometimes it's that one-on-one. We found that sometimes parents will connect with one another at those meetings, and then they become friends. And then we help facilitate that and provide support within that relationship for the peer mentorship. Another thing that we do with the teens, we have, let me just back up and mention, because it's on the slide, about grandparents. We, in the Latino community, we I'm
see
so
that there's a
glad
lot
that
of
you are
support
all
from
here. I'm going to
grandparents,
let you know
and
that I'm going to
families are
record
relying on that
this.
support from the
So
grandparents.
if any
We
of you
need to
ask
remember at
questions,
Jacob's Heart that
I will
the
repeat
grief
the
of the
question into the
grandparents is
microphone.
twofold.
So this,
They're
I'm Lori Butterworth.
grieving
I
and
know all
worried
of you.
about
I'm
their
the
son and
founder and
daughter,
executive
and then their
director of
grandchild
Jacob's
as
Heart.
well. So
I'm
let's not
also the
forget that.
co-founder of the Children's
And then when we
Hospice
look
and
at
Palliative Care
the
Coalition.
siblings
What this
who
training
lose
is
a
about
sibling,
is
their
helping
loss
our
is
volunteers
threefold.
and our teams
They
and our
lose their
partners
family
and the
unit
board
as they
understand
had
the
imagined
whole
it in life.
scope
I remember one
of
of the bereaved
hospice,
siblings, she
palliative
announced on our
care,
board,
and bereavement,
said we went into the
and
hospital
how
a
Jacob's
family of
Heart
5,
fits in,
and we came
and how
out
we
a
partner
family
with
of
that, what
4.
kinds of services
And she
we
said,
provide.
and I was
So
just
some
a
of this
sibling.
information is
Sometimes
a little
they feel
difficult.
that way
All of you
about
have been
themselves. I'm
volunteers here at
just a
Jacob's Heart for
sibling.
quite some
But she
time,
lost
and so you
her
very
family
much are the
unit
most
as she knew
prepared
it.
for
She
having
lost
some
her
of these
parents
conversations.
in
So
their
we're going to
grief,
go over
and she lost her
the
brother.
history of Jacob's
So
Heart.
let's
All of you know
remember
the
that
history of
sibling
Jacob's Heart,
grief is-
but I'm
we
going
need
to
to
tell you some of the
really
stories
acknowledge
about
that.
the
Some of you
beginning
may
of
have
Jacob's
heard the
Heart
story
that will put
recently
into context
about a
the
young man,
principles of palliative care
he's-
and
they're one of the
bereavement and the
families that we're
family-centered
still supporting with
services.
practical
So
support.
you'll hear another
His
kind of a
sister
version
died.
of our history
He was
that will help you
17 when she
understand
died.
the philosophy behind the
He
palliative
was
care
17,
and
she was
bereavement
14,
services that we
and
provide.
he felt like it was his
So I'll also,
responsibility to protect
people
his
have
little sister.
requested sort of a history of
To protect
hospice
her. Yeah,
in the
to
United
protect
States.
her.
Some of you have
And so
volunteered
he
at
felt like
hospice
he
as
had
well,
failed.
but
And he
I'll
shut
focus
himself
specifically on
down.
hospice for
He would
children.
go in the room and turn on the
how
loud
that
music and
movement
would
has
not talk to
gone about
anyone.
in the U.S.
So here is his mom and dad,
how it affects our children
grieving
that
the
we
loss
serve
of
at
their
Jacob's
daughter
Heart.
and worried about
And then we'll
the son.
define
And of
some
course, he was started
terms,
hanging out with the wrong people.
and we'll talk about
so
grief and
we
loss
kept trying to
and how we
intervene with the
navigate
peer mentor.
grief
He
and
had nothing
loss
to do with it.
with families
You know, let's
here at
do
Jacob's
counseling.
Heart.
Nothing
And then we'll
to do
take
with
some
it.
time
It
at
was
the
about a
end
year
for some questions,
before
comments,
one time
and I'd like to
he
hear from
answered the
people
phone,
about their responses
and it was
to this.
our other Norma,
And then if you're
inviting
if you are
him to go
ever
to the
in need
boardwalk.
of support
They were going to do
or
an
have a
outing
question,
for the
just feel
bereaved
free to ask
siblings.
any of us.
And he paused,
So I
thought
want
for a
to
moment,
acknowledge
said,
that
"I've
the
never been
Jacob's
before."
Heart staff,
And he went.
all of our,
We were
our staff
so,
members
so
recently
happy that he
received
finally would
5
go.
scholarships
And the way we set
to
that
go
up
to an
is that
intensive
all
training.
other
You guys might
teens who
remember
lost a
when a
sibling,
lot of us were gone
and then the
at this training.
chaperones are
It's the End of Life
adults
Nursing
who have lost a
Education
sibling when they were
Consortium
young.
training.
So it's all- and
our
they have a good
bilingual,
time.
bicultural
And that was
staff,
what
as well
the
as some
feedback
of the
from him
family
was that
members
he
who work here,
didn't
were
ever
able to be
realize that he
trained
was
in
allowed
this.
to
So a
have
lot
fun.
of the concepts
so
and
then-
the things that I'll be
then
sharing
you
with
can
you
see
today
how then
are
it
from
can
that training.
start.
I
We
was
can
trained
start
as a
to
trainer
really support him.
I have my thing on the wall over there. You can see it. When I got the award for palliative care.
Yeah, that's a really good
and
point. If you
also
can't
was
hear on the
trained as a
tape,
trainer
it's just
back
that
in, I think,
you have your
2007.
peers,
But the
and it's the same
curriculum
with
has been
parents.
so
You
enriched.
have-
and every
you have
time
your
we
peers,
go,
and they're
we
your
learn
friends,
so
but they
much
don't
more.
understand.
So I would recommend
And
if
there
any
are
of you
those
can ever
special,
go. It's
special
really a
relationships
valuable,
with people who
valuable
share the
training.
same experience.
Okay, so let's
They
start
may not
talking
socialize at
about
all outside of the Jacob's Heart events. which is
palliative
fine.
care and
but when they're
hospice.
there together,
Okay, first of all,
they
hospice.
can, really
I'll
know
see
that
here,
that they share
Okay,
that
so
experience. It's a
we
very
asked the question,
bonding-
what is
bonding
hospice?
experience.
And just to be clear, Jacob's
that's
Heart
the sort of that
does.
those
Do you guys
stories
know?
give us
I
a
would ask you. Do you know if
framework
Jacob's Heart provides
of
hospice
the
care?
grief support. We're
would you
very
guess?
committed to it.
No, right, no, we don't
have
provide
families
hospice
that have
care
been
because in order to provide
participating
hospice care,
for,
you are a licensed
17 years,
hospice, and hospice
And
is a
one mother just
benefit
shared, it was
for
just the anniversary
for
of
the
her son's
terminally
death.
ill. That is really
And
the key
she said,
to hospice, and it's a
every
whole
year,
philosophy
about 2
of
weeks
care,
before that
family-centered
date,
care that
I
looks at the
feel it
whole
in my
patient,
body.
mind, body,
2
and
weeks
spirit.
before. I don't
And
even
we'll
have
talk
to
a
look at
little
the
bit more
calendar.
about that
I know
philosophy.
it's coming.
But we don't
And
provide
it's been
hospice
13
care.
years.
We work with
So,
hospices
being
for
there for
integrating
her,
services
and
when
one of the
there's a loss
really
of a
amazing
child.
healing things
So
for her
now
is
palliative
walking
care.
through other
So there's
families,
people
other
get those
newly
kind of mixed
bereaved.
up, like what's
They'll
the
spend
difference
holidays
between
together,
hospice and
first
palliative care?
holiday
So
without
for
their child.
palliative care, there's there are
do-
different definitions.
we do in December,
We
every
here
December,
at Jacob's
we
Heart
do our
use the
candle lighting, which is
definition
open to
by
the
the
public,
American
anyone who's
Academy of
lost a child.
Pediatrics. That
By
is
any
the
disease, any
definition
circumstance, or
that
any
we use,
age
and I will give
can
you the whole
participate. That we do
two-page
that. There's a
definition
program
of
the Compassionate
pediatric
Friends.
palliative care.
So we work really
So
closely
Jacob's
with
Heart
them
does
to do candlelighting
provide
service
palliative care.
The second Sunday in
Palliative
December.
care, there's a
And
clinical
families
piece
come
of
here, they
palliative
bring a
care,
potluck
which
of
is
their
nursing
children's
care.
favorite food.
Do we do that?
And they light candles
No,
at 7
but there's
o'clock.
also
And then
that
they,
care is
when the next
integrated
time
with the
zone
psychosocial,
comes, the
emotional,
bereaved
and
families,
family
parents,
support,
in
the
the next time zone
practical
will light their
support.
candles. It
You'll
goes around
see
the
in the
globe.
American Academy of
It's-
Pediatrics
Yeah,
definition
it's real, and
of palliative
at
care,
that, we do
that it
those all
talks
over our
about
service area.
it's
This
care
year we're
that's
hoping to do one in
integrated.
King
Spiritual
City.
support,
So, but we
psychosocial
have it here at
support,
Santa
emotional
Cruz,
support, and
Watsonville,
practical support.
Monterey.
A lot of you have done the grocery deliveries.
Salinas,
That's practical
and,
support. something
now
that
hopefully
people don't
King
know is
City,
any
where the families
service
just gather and
can
they
really
know that
be
they're all lighting
palliative,
candles at the same time, and
as
that they're
long
gonna
as
go
it's
around.
integrated
and then the families
into
meet each
a
other
philosophy.
and
Palliative
decide
care
that that's
is a
where the grief
philosophy
and the
of care.
holidays
Both
programs
hospice
start.
and palliative care are
And
concepts,
you'll see that we're pretty busy
philosophies.
around the holidays
Hospice
here.
is not a place.
Not only with all the
palliative
programs that
care
we
is
do for
not
our
like
families in
one
treatment,
thing.
but
It's a philosophy.
so there's
of
one
care.
thing,
It
one
came
more
from
thing
the
I
whole
want to point
idea
out
of
that
a
we do
cloak.
very well here, that you'll
Kind of
see,
take a picture of a
and now
cloak
it'll start to make a
going
little more
around the
sense, is that we do
entire
have
family.
traditions, rituals,
It's
and
family
legacies.
centered. Let's look
You
at the
all know,
definition.
you all worked very closely with
sorry about that.
Maddie's
Okay.
grandma. And
So
Maddie Buell,
it's
she was
broader
the
than
first child to
hospice.
die of
Can be
Jacob's
used in
heart,
any stage of
and
the
she
illness.
loves to paint clay pots. Yes,
And
you
it is
know,
designed,
yes.
this is
and
key,
You
it is
think about how
designed
many
to meet the
clay
unique and
pots
special needs of
and
children
plants
for
have been
pediatrics,
planted
children
in
living
her memory
with a
over these
life-threatening
past years.
condition.
And you think
Okay,
about
it's not
what
just
that
associated
means to
with
her
death.
family.
Okay?
That is a ritual.
It recognizes
Rituals
that
don't
everyone
always
in the
just
family is
happen in
affected.
churches.
You notice that
It's
here.
a ritual. It's something we
and one of the
do.
goals of
We
palliative
do
care
breaking of chocolate
is to
chip
improve the
cookies
quality
here.
of life
This do
for the
in
family.
remembrance of me.
That
That
definition
is
of
a memory
pediatric
of
palliative care
Marissa.
came out a few years ago.
The
We've
peppermint
had that's been our
patties,
mission
those little
statement at Jacob's Heart
mints.
since
Those are in
1998.
memory of Samantha.
So yeah,
I dressed
so
as
it's
Glenda.
that. Do you all know why? We knew, and so when we were
In
talking about
memory
the
of
history of
Vanessa,
Jacob's Heart,
who loved the
I'll
Wizard
share
of Oz.
with you a piece
Year
of the history of
after
Jacob
year
that you
after
may not
year.
know. All these
Each
years
of
being
those
here,
special
that
things
just
about
recently
children.
I had a
And
conversation
and
with
we've lost
Jacob about his
120
memories
children.
when he was
And
5 years old in the
every
hospital.
family we sit
And people would bring him
think, okay, what is
toys,
it?
and
You see
people would
Derek's
bring him,
corner over here.
you know, things
It's
to
the
make him
sharing of
feel
toys
better. People
with
always
others.
assume that
It's
a
some
stuffed
of it's
animal, you know, we're not
reading
really
books,
all
some
that
of
into
it's
so many
rainbows,
stuffed
but
animals
there's
here.
all these
We're more
different
into
things that we
practical
do
support for
in
families.
remembrance
Because
of
what
me.
Jacob said,
Those are
even
rituals,
back in
those are
1998,
legacies,
was
and those are the
what he worried
traditions that we
most
hold
about
very
was his
safely and
family.
closely here with
5
Jacob's
years
Heart. You'll
old,
see some of these
he
on the
worried about
flips.
his family.
Those are the
And
traditions.
it was of
And that's
great
part
comfort to
of
him,
our
even at 5 years
bereavement
old,
program.
when we came
So
and supported his
thank you
mother.
for, do you have any
He said, you were the
comments,
first
questions?
person that came and said, resources that want to take care of my mother, and he remembers feeling a sense of relief.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that,
Yeah.
at 5 years old, yeah.
Okay.
That
So
is
I'm going to turn off and
really
thank you
one
if
of
you
the
wanna,
concepts,
talk
the
a little
key
bit.
concepts of palliative care is family-centered care. And we can really understand it from a child's perspective because we know here that what a child needs more than